There are moments in politics when two completely different worlds collide. One loud, brash, and addicted to spectacle, and the other quiet, strategic, and unnervingly calm. That's exactly what happened the moment Mark Carney walked into the Oval Office to confront a U.S. president who built his entire identity on the idea that he is the master of the deal. Most people expected Carney to bow, soften his tone, and tiptoe around Trump's ego. But what happened next shook the room, stunned the reporters watching, and revealed a truth that much of America never expected to hear from a Canadian leader. This story isn't about insults. It isn't about cheap shots. It's about something deeper. Canada finally realizing that admiration doesn't come from chasing U.S. approval. It comes from leadership. It comes from backbone. And it comes from a country refusing to play the role that Washington assigned it decades ago. Because when Trump tried to twist facts, mock Canada, and dominate the conversation, Carney didn't flinch, didn't fold, didn't crack. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He exposed the myth behind America's loudest negotiator and revealed the new reality shaping the future of both countries. And trust me, what happens next will change how you see this relationship forever. Trump has built his persona on one idea, that no one negotiates better than him. He has repeated it on TV, written it in books, and bragged about it on stage. But when Carney was asked to describe Trump's negotiating talent, he didn't destroy him directly. He didn't need to. Instead, he did something far more revealing. Carney quietly explained the truth. Trump's power at the negotiation table doesn't come from genius. It comes from leverage. He spelled it out clearly. Anyone sitting in the Oval Office already commands the world's strongest military, the world's largest economy, and decades of deeply integrated trade relationships. That isn't talent. That's inherited structural dominance. Carney exposed the myth with surgical precision. He framed Trump not as a master strategist, but as someone simply holding the world's most powerful cards. And then he contrasted it with Canada's approach. While Trump relied on pressure and bravado, Canada relied on patience, multiple negotiation channels, and the refusal to accept anything less than a great deal. It was subtle, it was calm, but it absolutely dismantled the illusion. And just when it seemed like Carney had said enough, he revealed something even more unsettling. Trump had fundamentally changed the entire relationship without warning, and Canada was forced to grow up overnight. But that wasn't the whole story. Carney didn't sugarcoat it. For decades, Canada and the U.S. built a relationship that grew closer, deeper, and more intertwined. Then one day, without warning, Trump tore it apart. No conversation, no consultation, no negotiation, just a one-sided break. Carney described it with controlled precision. The U.S. didn't ask for input. It simply acted. And the consequences rippled across Canada instantly. Factories shaken, supply chains disrupted, communities like Brampton hit with a shock they never saw coming. Even in the interview, Carney refused to hide the reality. The U.S. didn't just change policy, it broke trust. And Canadians learned the painful lesson that dependence is a dangerous place to stand. But instead of spiraling into anger, Carney used something else, clarity. He acknowledged the hurt, acknowledged the shift, and then delivered the line that defined an era. The relationship has changed, so we take matters into our own hands. Those words weren't emotional, they were strategic. Canadians weren't going to wait for respect anymore. They were going to build it from within. And just when the audience thought the shift couldn't get more surprising, Carney revealed an unexpected twist involving late-night messages from Trump himself, and what happened next would shock everyone watching. When Carney first met Trump in the Oval Office, something unusual happened. Trump offered Carney his personal number, voluntarily. That alone was surprising. But what came after was even more revealing. Carney described the texting style with a smile that said everything. All caps, multiple exclamation points, unpredictable timing, middle of the night, early morning. No pattern, no boundaries. It wasn't communication, it was pressure. Where most leaders would see chaos, Carney saw something else. Insecurity masked as dominance. Trump tried to overwhelm the conversation through volume, digital and emotional. But Carney didn't play the game. He didn't mirror the energy. Instead, he stayed consistent, measured, and unmoved. The contrast was almost cinematic. On one side, a president firing messages at all hours. On the other, a Canadian policymaker refusing to be dragged into a storm. These texts weren't just late-night rants. They were an attempt to reshape every negotiation, every moment, every headline. And they exposed something crucial about the Trump era. Control was a performance, not a skill. But the moment that truly defined the power dynamic wouldn't come through texts. It would come face-to-face inside the Oval Office, under the cameras, with reporters watching from every corner. Imagine being surrounded by 75 reporters, cameras clicking, every breath monitored. Trump seated inches away, taking aim at your country, mocking, twisting numbers, turning facts into theater. Most leaders would panic, deflect, or soften their message. Carney didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He didn't take the bait. He didn't let Trump drag him into a shouting match designed for headlines. Instead, he used silence as a weapon, because silence forces the other person to expose themselves. And Trump did. But then something even more shocking happened. In front of those cameras, Trump casually referred to Carney as president. Not Mark, not Mr. Carney, president. He tried to correct the record lightly, but the message was already out. Trump's subconscious spoke louder than his insults. The man who hated being called Donald had just elevated a Canadian official to equal rank, and the tension in the room shifted instantly. But the most stunning moment wasn't the title slip. It came when Trump joked, half serious, half wishful, that Canada could never say never about joining the United States. What Carney said next ended that fantasy forever. There are moments when diplomacy ends and identity begins. When Trump hinted Canada shouldn't rule out becoming part of the United States, the room froze. The reporters leaned in. The staff paused. Even Trump seemed half curious how Carney would respond. Carney didn't miss a beat. In the calmest tone imaginable, he said 3 words that hit harder than any insult, any tariff, any speech. Never, never, ever. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a full stop on one of the oldest American fantasies, that Canada secretly wants to be absorbed by its southern neighbor. Then Carney drove the point home by stating what most Canadians already knew but rarely heard in such blunt terms. Canada is one of the most admired countries in the world. Lots of people want to be Canada. And he wasn't exaggerating. Survey after survey ranks Canada at the top worldwide. Quality of life, trust, safety, political stability, global reputation. It wasn't arrogance, it was fact. Trump heard the message loud and clear. Canada wasn't auditioning for U.S. approval. The era of Big Brother, Little Brother was done. But this wasn't about ego. Carney was preparing Canadians for something far bigger and more dangerous. The new American identity that could shake the entire continent. And that's where the real warning began.
Carney laid out the truth with the precision of someone who had seen every internal shift in Washington.
The America Canada once knew, the predictable partner, the stable ally, the dependable neighbor, that version was gone. A new America had emerged, faster, more aggressive, more chaotic, and far less interested in partnership. Carney didn't sensationalize it. He simply told the truth. The U.S. isn't behaving like a friend reacting to disagreements. It's behaving like a hyperpower reasserting dominance. And Canada cannot afford to pretend the relationship will return to the way it was in the 1980s or 1990s. U.S. changes hit instantly, Carney explained. Tariffs, restrictions, pressure points, all executed in weeks, not years. Meanwhile, Canada's rebuilding takes time. Infrastructure takes years. Ports, transit, homes, none of these can be built with the snap of a finger. So, Carney delivered a message Canada hadn't heard so bluntly before. We take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, and we can give ourselves more than the Americans can take away. But he wasn't finished, because if Canada was going to survive this new geopolitical landscape, it needed a blueprint, a detailed plan for independence, competitiveness, and national resilience. And that's when Carney revealed the 3 pillars that would define Canada's future. Carney's vision wasn't a slogan. It wasn't a campaign speech. It was an engineering manual for a new country, one built to withstand pressure from any global power, including the United States. The first pillar was Build Canada. Carney wasn't speaking in metaphors. He meant literal construction. Homes for a growing population. Ports capable of handling global trade without relying on American infrastructure. Energy corridors designed to power Canadian cities and industries. Transit networks that move people and workers efficiently. Cultural hubs that turn Canada into a magnet for creators, investors, and talent. This wasn't just construction, it was nation building. The second pillar was the AI revolution. While other countries fought over who invented the next big model, Carney focused on something more strategic: application. Canada already had the talent. It had research centers respected worldwide. But the real opportunity was in integrating AI into every sector: healthcare, manufacturing, finance, agriculture, transportation. Carney saw AI not as a trend, but as the foundation of Canada's next wave of productivity. And the third pillar was the low-carbon economy. Carney knew this wasn't optional. The world is moving toward cleaner energy, and the countries that adapt early will control the markets of tomorrow. Canada has the natural resources, the land, the technology, and the global trust to become one of the leaders in this shift. Hydrogen, renewables, battery metals, green manufacturing. Carney saw all of it as Canada's competitive edge. Together, these pillars weren't just a plan, they were a declaration. Canada's future does not depend on the United States, not economically, not politically, not strategically, and that clarity set the stage for Carney's final, defining message. Carney's closing message wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, but it carried the weight of a generational shift. He reminded Canadians that the country's strength has never come from chasing American validation. It came from building something different, something stable, trusted, admired, and consistent. Yes, the relationship with the U.S. had changed. Yes, it would be harder. Yes, there would be pressure, tariffs, and political theatrics. But Carney was clear. Canada's destiny is written at home, not in Washington. He encouraged Canadians to stand together during this transition, to understand that the short-term pain caused by U.S. unpredictability would be replaced by long-term independence and prosperity. It wasn't just a political message, it was a cultural shift. Canadians were finally waking up to an idea that had been whispered for decades but never spoken so plainly. Canada is strong enough to stand alone when necessary, proud enough to say no, confident enough to reject pressure, and capable enough to chart its own future. And in that moment, you could see why the world admires Canada, not because of American approval, but because of Canadian leadership. The story of Mark Carney versus Donald Trump isn't the story many people think it is. It's not a clash of personalities or a simple diplomatic disagreement. It's the moment when Canada realized it no longer needed to whisper. It could speak plainly. It could stand its ground. It could shape its own future without waiting for Washington's permission. Carney showed something rare in modern politics: strength without shouting, confidence without chaos, strategy without theatrics. His calm dismantling of Trump's negotiation myth, his refusal to be bullied in the Oval Office, and his declaration that Canada will never, never, ever become part of the United States, all of it signaled a new era for the country. He didn't attack, he didn't mock, he didn't escalate. Instead, he exposed the simple truth that power doesn't come from volume. It comes from clarity, from patience, from national unity. The U.S. may remain a hyperpower. Its influence will still shape global markets and politics. But Canada, under Carney's vision, isn't trying to match America. It's building something different, something stable, something sustainable, something admired. The world is changing, and alliances are shifting. But Carney's message is clear. Canada doesn't rise because America approves. Canada rises because Canadians choose to build, innovate, adapt, and stand together. And that is why, when the cameras stopped rolling and the Oval Office doors closed, one thing had already changed permanently. Canada no longer walks behind the United States. It walks beside it, on its own terms.